Hello and welcome to the Craft Beer Corner. For today's beer review, we are jumping right back into another review of beers that you can get through Tavour. I am jumping straight from ending my first shipment into the second because honestly, I was so blown away by the quality and breadth of all of the various beers you could get from there. I had to get my hands on some more, and these are, again, all going to be brand new beers to me. Most of them are from brewers I've never had before, but all of them are beers I've never had before, and they're all really hard to get, really exciting, and I just wanted to continue that stream. I will get back into more beers that are easier to find if you're not signed up with Tavour, which I encourage you to check out. And indeed, I will be leaving a link on my Facebook page. That's the Craft Beer Corner. You can find us on Facebook. My code that if you're new to Tavour and you sign up and you place an order, if you enter my code, you will get $10 off your first order with Tavour. So help you get a foot in, get a couple beers for free, depending on price. You pay per beer, then flat shipment for how many you load over the several weeks. But at any rate, today ought to be a fun one. I am returning to my hophead roots, and we are doing a tour of IPAs today. We've got two from Ecliptic Brewing and then one from Reuben's Brews. The first one we're going to try is the Ecliptic Starburst IPA. This clocks in at 7.8% and they are based out of Portland, Oregon. This one is brewed with a blend of 5 different hops, all very big, bold, high alpha acid content hops. Amarillo, Azacca, Centennial, Mosaic, and Simcoe for the Starburst. So this ought to be really good. The second beer is from Reuben's Brews. This is their summer IPA, and they are based out of Seattle, Washington. This is a 6.5% ABV and is brewed strictly with Centennial hops. In each batch of this beer that they brew, they put over 11 pounds of Centennial hops. So I expect this to be very, very hop forward indeed. I'm very excited for this one. And then finally, we return to Ecliptic Brewing again. This is their Cosmos. It is a coconut and vanilla IPA. Again, they're out of Portland, Oregon. This one's 8% ABV. I believe the first and the last beer I'm trying here are going to be a hazier IPA. So I don't think the Reuben's Brews is, so we'll have a little bit of difference. A couple from one brewer, one from another, all just IPAs. So I'm ready to jump right in, and the hop head in me is just really excited to jump in. So we're going to start at the top with the Ecliptic Starburst IPA. All right, so jumping right in with our first beer, the Ecliptic Starburst, 7.8% ABV, 5 different hops that are all massive high alpha acid content hops. Alpha acids are the acids that occur in the hop plant and in the cone naturally that are primarily responsible for the bittering effect in beer. So what we perceive as a bitter taste is related to the alpha acid content of the hop. Just as a comparison, an example, say a classic English Fuggle, which is a super mild bittering hop used in English special bitters and a lot of other traditional English beers and outside of England as well. I think it's got an alpha acid content of, on average, between 3.5 to 4.5, depending on the crop, whereas something like Centennial or Simcoe might have anywhere from 12 to even 15 and upward. So we're talking 3 times the potency. Makes a big difference. I love it. That's what IPAs are all about for me. So let's go ahead and get this one cracked. We are returning to our old faithful glassware here, the classic Sam Adams glass, which is a great glass for really all beer styles, but I really like it for IPAs. Lets the head form very nicely, and the aromas of the hops really trap well and pour out of that tulip. So let's get this poured in. All right, it's looking very nice. Nice pale yellow color here, actually. Really nice looking beer. Give it a little agitation, let that head form. There we go. That head looks to me like it's going to collapse pretty quickly here. It's got relatively loosely formed bubbles. Nice medium, and I can see them just bursting away. All right. Yeah, that's a very lovely beer. In fact, this looks very akin to a classic IPA or a nice Czech or German Pilsner. It's just a little darker than a Helles Lager. Slight, I mean, ever so slight orangish hue, but overall, I would say it's a true yellow color, a little deeper than straw. So a little deeper roast on these malts. Head formed beautifully. Let's give it a sniff. It's very effervescent too, so I expect I'm going to get a good aroma, and it's really helping that head go strong. Oh, yeah, this is going to be a big beer right here. It smells absolutely fantastic. Up front, you get really, really lovely floral notes and a lot of citrus. There's a lot of citrus in there, and certainly I'm picking up a little bit of pine in the background. That's probably coming in from a mix of the Simcoe and Centennial. They tend to impart some of those aromas, but it smells really nice. It smells so hoppy. Let's go ahead and dive in. That head is settled, so let's jump in. Oh, that's a delicious IPA right there. Oh, oh, that's a lovely beer. It really is. Okay, all of these hops, big bold hops, and while they are much higher in alpha acid content, I would say this is not quite to the level of bitter as, say, a Stone Rumination or a Sierra Nevada Torpedo Extra IPA. It's still very hop forward, but I think that they balanced it out more than anything. Perhaps there was a bit more dry hopping involved to impart extra aroma without adding extra alpha acids into the actual batch. But it's still got a nice bitter presence. It's very, very nice. It's fruity, and it's floral, and it's earthy, and it's piney all at the same time. If I tried to describe the proportions of each, I would say it's at least a third kind of citrusy, then maybe 20-ish% to 25% floral, and then about an even split mix for the remainder of earth and pine. And the citrus followed by the floral comes up front in that order, and then it opens up into earthy and pine on the back. And it's a really nice flavor ride. I'm a fan of all of these flavor profiles in hoppy beers, and that they were able to execute one that let all of those independent, distinctly different hop profiles speak in the beer and resonate on my taste buds. This is a home run for me. They could have made it hoppier or less hoppy, and I would still enjoy it because it is so well balanced. As it were, I think this would appeal to a lot of people unless you absolutely hate IPAs, don't like anything that's even remotely bitter. I would say try this one if you can get your hands on it. Gonna have another sip and explore the body and mouthfeel here. It's a classic IPA body and mouthfeel. The body is actually almost like a textbook standard IPA, maybe somewhere in the medium range. It's not super heavy, it's not super light, it's just medium. That's very classic, just standard IPA, not double, triple imperial, just a standard IPA. And the mouthfeel is also very standard IPA with maybe a slight hint moving towards kind of a more creamy, silky texture. It's very effervescent in the mouth and it feels very smooth. It's not very viscous. It doesn't feel like it's got a lot of weight to it, but it's a very smooth mouthfeel, and it's so effervescent and the bubbles are so fine. It adds kind of the effect that a cream ale has, not quite to that same extent, but there's a lot of that same effect where it does impart this slight creamy texture feeling as it's rolling around on your palate. It's really well done. It's got a nice long finish too, and that's the beautiful part about this beer. It's got a nice finish, a nice ride, and it follows that exact wonderful balance that I explained earlier, how all the flavors popped in. This is a great beer. I'm going to take my time finishing enjoying this and go work up my scores. And then next we will move on to the Reuben's Brews, the Summer IPA out of Seattle, Washington. 6.5% ABV on that one, brewed with a boatload of Centennial hops. All right, jumping right into our second beer in today's review. It is the Reuben's Brew Summer IPA out of Seattle, Washington. This one's 6.5%. Centennial hop is the star of this beer. Just a boatload of pounds upon pounds upon pounds, 11 to be precise, of Centennial hops are poured into each batch of this that they brew. So I expect this to be exceptionally hop forward. Nice 6.5. So this is really sitting in that Goldilocks zone for me for IPAs, where there's not so many fermentables in there that it's going to drown out the bittering quality of the hops. So let's go ahead and get this cracked open and get this poured into the glass. This will not all fit, obviously. It's a tall can, but as I'm pouring this, this is another nice, lovely, this is actually a little lighter, maybe much more akin to the color of a Berliner Weisse or a classic Helles lager. No hint of amber or orange hue at all, just a nice pale straw color. Berliner Weisse, Saison, that nice light true yellow. Very effervescent beer again. Formed a really nice head. A really nice head indeed. Nice creamy foamy head on there. Let's give it a sniff while these bubbles are working their magic. Yeah, you can smell a really nice mix of the grain bill, which smells very grainy indeed, very toasty. And you get a really big nose full of the hop. Head's already dissipating quickly here, but yeah, the hop comes through really in equal parts with the grains. So it's got a really nice balance in the aroma. Let's go ahead and jump in and have a taste and see what this is like. That's very nice. That's a nice IPA. That's well balanced. That Centennial hop really gets to sing in this beer. This is another one where it's got a nice bitter to it, but it's not overtly bitter. It's not pungently bitter. Like the two I like to reference as a good pungently bitter IPA would be Stone's Ruination and Sierra Nevada's Torpedo Extra IPA. This is much more akin to a little more bitter than an average standard IPA, but it's nice. It's well balanced. I don't think this would put anybody off. The Centennial hop is really the star of this beer. You can taste it very, very strongly. That is the overwhelming flavor that comes through in this one. The way that it finishes, though, in tandem with the nice earthy bitters that you get from Centennial hops, it lets the malt bill come through. And what I smelled on the nose, this nice kind of toast and bread crust and kind of toasty, biscuity, grainy kind of qualities come through in the end of this beer. Had a really clean finish, nice balance, and it's actually pretty long. It's not super pronounced, but it is a nice long finish, and it's very, very clean. And the mouthfeel is really silky. I'm going to taste again and get it in my mouth to get a sense of the body. Yeah, the body's actually got some nice weight to it. At 6.5%, I wouldn't have anticipated the body being as present comparative to the Ecliptic Starburst we reviewed first, but honestly, I think it's at least as heavy of a body, if not slightly more, even with fewer fermentables. It's definitely medium, almost bordering on a medium heavy body. It's got some presence. The mouthfeel is very silky. It's very silky and smooth, classic IPA, but it actually does have a bit of viscosity to it, which does let all of those flavors linger around the palate and helps create that really nice long finish because it just sticks to the tongue and you can really, really taste it. This is a really nice IPA. They call it summer IPA. I wouldn't disagree. This is one that I would enjoy, another classic hot summer day beer. Maybe if you're not a hophead, you wouldn't find it quite as thirst quenching or refreshing, but if you're a big lover of IPAs and the bitters and a nice clean one, I think you would. I like what they're doing with this. My first beer I've ever tried by Reuben's Brews. I'm a fan. I like it. I'm going to take my time, really break this down, all the categories, and get my scores, and take my time enjoying this beer. And coming up, finally, we will close with the Ecliptic Cosmos. This is a coconut and vanilla IPA at 8%. All right, moving on to the final beer of today's Tavour review. This is the Ecliptic Cosmos, which is a coconut and vanilla hazy IPA. Again, they're out of Portland, Oregon, and this one clocks in at 8% ABV. Now, the label on Ecliptic beers, I don't know if they're all like this, but every one I've ever had has had kind of this foil holographic effect. I don't know if the camera's picking that up, but they look pretty neat. Suffice to say, coconut and vanilla, good combination in beers. Indeed, we reviewed a few episodes ago Prairie Artisan Ales Paradise, which was a coconut and vanilla imperial stout. However, I have never in my wildest dreams have imagined that flavor combination in an IPA. So I'm very interested to see how and if this works. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get this poured in the glass. All right, it's already got a nice head form, so I can get a little gentler. And I won't fit the whole bottle in there anyway, so I don't feel compelled to have to fill this all the way up. But it is exactly as advertised. This is very hazy indeed, very akin to New England style. You know my thoughts on this if you've been watching my videos, but I'm not going to hold it against it. I always keep an open mind. The head looks fantastic. It is super creamy. Honestly, it looks like it came off of a nitro tap at a bar. It literally is that lush and thick and creamy. That is just a decadent head. It is pillowy. It is absolutely pillowy. Let's see if we can spy. Yeah, I can see the effervescence going up. It seems to be quite effervescent and really tight, tiny bubbles, which is probably what helped produce this nice, tightly formed head. That tends to be the case when you're pouring from a bottle or from a can. The size of the bubbles that the carbonation creates are directly related to how the head forms. Tighter, smaller equals a finer, typically, and creamier, thicker head. Not always, but it's kind of a generality. Let's give it a sniff. It smells really nice. You can smell the nice grain back. It smells like good, lighter grains, and you can smell the hops on the aroma. Combination of floral and citrus, but without question, you can smell that coconut and vanilla in there. It's not the dominant aroma that comes through, but you can definitely smell it. So very, very nice and interesting smelling aroma combination. It's not the most pronounced aroma in the world, but you can definitely smell it. I'd say the aroma, strength-wise, is a little above average, but head's dissipated down a little bit here, though it's clinging strong and true to the sides and indeed still nice pillowy foam on top. But let's jump in and give it a sip. Oh, that's nice beer. That's nice beer. At 8%, as you would expect, it's got a medium body. Medium heavy, so it's right in range for the ABV. And the mouthfeel, as is it, you might also suspect from how the head formed and how tight those bubbles were in the carbonation rising up, very silky, creamy mouthfeel, very akin to a cream ale. Ridiculously smooth and creamy and silky. And it's got a nice bitter back to it. You can clearly tell it's an IPA, but that coconut and vanilla that they added definitely gives it a different flavor profile and finish for sure. The coconut does not come through particularly dominant. I'm going to have to take a few other sips on this just to really see if I can pick it out and where it is. But the vanilla does come through, not on the front, but on the back. And aside from the rather floral and slightly citrusy aroma and flavor that comes through, it finishes with a nice earthy hop profile, which is one of my absolute favorites. It's like tied for top. I like the piney, I like the earthy. I really like them, and the bigger the better. And this, especially for a hazy with this new craze going on, I didn't expect it to be quite that hop forward, but it's very, very enjoyable. This is so far a solid beer. I'm going to see if I can pick out the coconut in here as well. It's subtle. It's in there, it's subtle. It's on the front. It doesn't finish with coconut, it's on the front. And it mixes with all that hop and all the qualities of the hop, and the coconut and the vanilla kind of marry, and it mixes all in there. It's an interesting flavor sensation on the front, especially if you're swishing around to let it coat your palate. And this, the mouthfeel does have some good viscosity to it. Probably the thicker nature and the creaminess of that body helps it to stick, and it really lingers. But aside from up front where you get those characteristics, really it's true to style. It's an IPA at heart, and the hop is still the main player. The coconut and vanilla is just a nice little added bonus that adds some extra aroma and some extra interesting flavors that mixes with the very, very strong hop profile. It's very nice. I wouldn't say it's ridiculously bitter, but if you like IPAs, I would say you'd probably enjoy it. It's not a weak IPA. It's probably a little more pungent than average, but again, my benchmark, it's not a Stone Ruination IPA, and it's not a Sierra Nevada Torpedo Extra IPA. It's between average and there, so, you know, kind of teetering just about smack in the middle. But it's nice, and it's got a nice long finish to it that really just lets the bitters sing out. And it's not pungent bitter, but you can experience the bitter. And indeed, the last sip I had was probably 30 seconds ago. I can still taste those beautifully earthy bitters all over my palate. Really nice beer. I'm a fan. I like this a lot. I wasn't sure what I would think about this, but I really do enjoy it. This is a really, really solid IPA. I'm going to take my time, enjoy this nice big bottle here while I come up with my rankings, and then we will come back and go through all three top to bottom on the scale and see where they fall. Be right back. All right, now that we have gotten to enjoy and sample all three of these IPAs in today's IPA review, we're going to go through and give them the scores. I enjoyed all of them, and IPA is still tied for first. My favorite style, it's a three-way tie, Stouts, Porters, IPAs, and I'll take any variation thereof. I love all beer, but IPAs as an absolute hophead, it's really one of the only styles where you get that really intense hoppy character that just imparts bitters and aroma and just ridiculously interesting finishes and crazy flavors that are completely different than how the aroma belies unto the beer. So IPAs, I love them. Always a fun time when I'm doing an IPA review. But starting off, we're going to jump back to the Ecliptic Starburst IPA. This was 7.8% ABV. To recap, this one had 5 different varieties of hop in it. It was Amarillo, Azacca, Centennial, Mosaic, and Simcoe. So all 5 of these are very, very well known as being very big, bold, high alpha acid hops that impart crazy, interesting, and pungent aroma, as well as flavor, as well as bittering. So really good hop selection, and they all play upon one another and impart something completely different. The world of hops is completely unique, and this beer was a great example of exactly why they're all different. And when using a specific hop variety, it's going to totally change the beer. But starting out with this one, the aroma, it was very present, and you could smell all of the different aromas that each of the different hops brought to the table. You had floral, you had citrus, you had pine and resin, you had earthy, and you had blueberry, which, if you don't know, Mosaic hops are rather known for their blueberry aroma. It's really quite a lovely aroma that a hop imparts, but this one, I loved it. Well above average, I gave that an 8 out of 10. The taste, again, kind of for the same reasons and all those hops played their part, I gave it the exact same score. I also gave that an 8 out of 10. For the body, this had a really big body. I mean, 7.8% ABV, that's a little higher than probably your average standard IPA. And, you know, that extra bit helped. Not that ABV always is going to be an indicator of body and mouthfeel, but it's a pretty good marker. And indeed, that was the case here. I gave it just 1 point shy of perfection. I gave it a 9 out of 10. For the mouthfeel, this was so textbook IPA, but then just beyond silky smooth and very fine and very rich and creamy in the mouth. And it had a nice viscosity that let all of those hops just continue to play their song all over your taste buds. I loved it. I gave that a perfect 10 out of 10. For the finish, it was nice. It was long. It was well above average. I only wished that it would have lasted a little longer because I was enjoying this beer so much. But still, well above average and a well-earned 8 in the finish category. The head and retention, I've talked about this many times. It's a bit of a crapshoot. Comes down to how carbonated the specific beer is, how good your pour is, how clean your glassware is. But when you're not on a tap, it can be a bit inconsistent. This was as good as any IPA head I've ever seen poured off a tap. I gave that a perfect 10 out of 10. It was fantastic. The appearance, this was textbook IPA. I couldn't dock any points there. Appearance, 10 out of 10. The balance on this, it goes so in tandem with the finish and all the other interplaying parts. Like body and mouthfeel are often related, as are finish and balance. They're not always going to be the same, but typically if it's got a nice mouthfeel, it's going to be playing a part due to the breadth of the body and vice versa. The same goes with the finish. If it's got a nice long finish, it's probably due to the balance of ingredients in the beer and vice versa. And that was true in this case, and I gave the balance a 9. Feeling an intangible on this one, I really, really enjoyed it. With that many big, bold, high alpha acid hops, I was actually expecting more hop pungency, a more astringent bittering effect to it. But it was very well balanced. So I kind of knew it wasn't going to be my personal, you know, big, bold in your face, the classic Stone Ruination, Sierra Nevada Torpedo Extra IPA, but it was still great, well above average for me personally. I gave it a 7. As an example of the style, this is a fantastic IPA. I gave it 1 point higher than the Feeling and Intangible. I gave it an 8. And that brings the total score on the Ecliptic Starburst to an 87 out of 100. A fantastic score, very high indeed, and well earned. Excellent beer. Moving on to number 2, this was Reuben's Brews. Another brewer that I've never had a beer from before, so getting to try an IPA from a new brewer for the first time is always a nice benchmark for me. This one is their summer IPA. They are out of Seattle, Washington. This was 6.5% ABV, and this one was brewed with Centennial hops being the star of this beer. And this beer, per batch that they brew, they put over 11 pounds of Centennial hops per batch, which is just a ludicrous amount of hops. And you could tell the aroma was pure Centennial hop, and you knew that it was full of them when you smelled it. Though interestingly enough, the aroma didn't come out as pronounced out of the glass as I would have liked, but you could absolutely smell the Centennial. I give it well above average, 7 out of 10. The taste, 6.5% ABV, a little lower on the average end of IPA. I think 7's really kind of the benchmark, really 6 to 7, but these days I tend to see 7 as kind of a middle of the road for an IPA. Brewers are getting bigger and bolder, and I'm a fan. By all means, keep exploring and going bigger and bolder. I love it. But for this one, I would have liked the flavor to be a little more pronounced, and I gave it a 7. Caveat being that this is a summer IPA, so maybe the IPA flavor intensity might be a bit much if you're considering this like a hot summer day beer and you want to quench your thirst. I'm not the average beer drinker. I'm a hophead, so you know, it could be 95 degrees outside and I'll go for an IPA to, to quench my thirst. I'm just crazy, I guess. Moving on, the body was really, really impressive. 6.5% ABV. Yeah, it's an IPA, so it's got more fermentables, but not a ludicrous amount. But this body was big and robust. I give it a 9 out of 10. The mouthfeel? The mouthfeel was equally excellent, and I also gave that just 1 point shy of perfection, 9 out of 10. The finish on this was really, really long. You know, lower ABV. I tend to not expect the finish to be quite as long just because there's not as much substance, though it is an IPA, so certainly there's substance, but I was blown away by how long this finish was, and I gave that a 9 out of 10 as well. The head retention, this one was exactly like the Starburst in that it was perfect from the can, could have come off of a draft. I gave it a perfect 10 out of 10. Moving to the appearance, this was a really, really nice looking IPA. It was a little paler than your average IPA, not by much, but it was enough I had to dock some points because it wasn't quite textbook, but still well above average. I gave it an 8 out of 10. The balance on this one was really, really nice. Certainly well above average. Just having that volume of Centennial hops in there and being an IPA, I expected it to be a little more hop forward than it was. It was well balanced, but in an IPA, I really want the hop to be front and center. It is the star of the act. And while it was a really nice beer that showcased Centennial as a hop, it was a little subdued and didn't come out quite as strongly as I like in an IPA. So I gave that still a very good score, 8 out of 10. Feeling any intangible, I gave it the exact same score as the balance. I gave that an 8 out of 10. Finally, as an example of the style, it was a nice IPA. But there are so many IPAs out there in the market, so you really need to be thinking critically when you're going through and coming up with how you evaluate your beers. Not just for your audience, but certainly for yourself, so you can keep it realistic and try not to let subjectivity enter the equation. I really enjoyed this beer, but I had to be fair, and it's still above average, but not on the exceptional end. I gave it a 7 out of 10 as an example of the style. And that brings the total score on the Reuben's Brews Summer IPA to an 82 out of 100, which is a still very high and very respectable score. Finishing up, we had the second beer from Ecliptic. Really great brewer. I've been drinking a lot of their beers as of late and loving all of them. This was their Cosmos Coconut and Vanilla IPA. This one is 8% ABV. This is a hazy IPA, and you've heard me talk about this many times. I am not a massive fan by any stretch of the imagination of the whole New England hazy IPA, juicy milkshake, all of that. I think IPAs you can experiment, but keep the base beer traditional. As it started in Britain, as they had to add more and more hops because they have an antiseptic quality and they make your beer last longer. That's how the IPA was born. It was back in days when we were traveling via ships and they were trading and moving in and setting up station in India. And if you're not familiar with geography or haven't looked at a map in a while, you will note if you look at it again that it is quite a way from the United Kingdom and England in particular to India. It's thousands of miles. And if you're traveling that long, of course you want your crew to be sated, so you're going to pack barrels of beer. But wouldn't it be a shame if the beer skunked before you got to your destination? Because this was happening before the time of refrigeration. So we already knew about the antiseptic quality of hops. So the brewers just said, hey, let's just keep dumping more hops into these pale ales we're giving the sailors to drink on their voyage. Because it was spoiled by the time they got there. Nothing to trade, nothing to drink while sailing to India via the trade route. More hops, more antiseptic quality, kills more bacteria, beer doesn't skunk as quickly, extends shelf life. It was a happy accident that it just got more bitter and bitter and bitter, hence the India Pale Ale was born. Little trivia for you, but that's the case, and that is the classic IPA recipe that I go for. You can experiment with it, but I don't want it to be hazy. I don't want it to be juicy. I don't want you to tell me it has anything remotely related to a milkshake. I want it pungent and I want it bitter. That is what defines an IPA for my money. So, moving on to the scores for Ecliptic Cosmos. Aroma. The aroma was nice, but it was not very pronounced at all. Just a little above average on the nose. I gave it a 6. You could smell all of the parts, but it just didn't have enough presence. The taste, quite a different story. I really enjoyed this. I truly didn't know what to expect, but I really enjoyed it. You could taste everything that went into this beer. And the hop was still the star of this one, which kind of surprised me, being that it was hazy and it also was coconut and vanilla, a flavor combination I would have never thought of, but it paired very well. And with all the hop qualities, it was a very interesting flavor combination, and it just hit you and just kept rolling around and changing. It was super enjoyable. I gave it a 9 out of 10. The body, I gave it the exact same thing. It was huge and robust. Big body to this beer. 8% ABV, you expect it might be bigger than norm, but this was much bigger than expected. I gave that a 9 out of 10. The mouthfeel, it must be an Ecliptic thing, because every Ecliptic beer I have, they just nail it. This was a perfect, silky smooth, ridiculously creamy, just delicious mouthfeel, and nice viscosity. 10 out of 10. To finish on this, related, that viscosity of the mouthfeel, which relates to the body, if you can nail that, it's going to help your finish extend, because all those flavors are going to keep lingering and sticking around in the mouth. And this was another perfect case example of why that is true. Perfect 10 out of 10 on the finish. It lasted so long, it was insane. The head and retention, just like the prior two, this poured just like it could have come off a tap. That was a perfect head, perfect long retention, 10 out of 10. The appearance on this, it was a perfect classic hazy IPA. It was the right color for an IPA, and it was hazy, exactly as advertised. Perfect 10 out of 10. The balance. Now, you might be surprised by this, but despite what I said prior, the balance, I had to dock some points, because not only was it a hazy IPA, but it was billed as coconut and vanilla, and they were definitely in there and you could taste them. But the balance of them, even though I, as a hop lover, appreciated fully that the hop was so present, being a coconut and vanilla IPA, I would have liked a little more presence from the coconut and the vanilla in there, so I had to take some points off, but still well above average, 7 out of 10 for the balance. Feeling in the intangible, the exact same score for the exact same reason. I really enjoyed it, but I would have liked more coconut and vanilla. And that brings us to the final category, example of the style. As a hazy IPA, it was really nice, and I only had to take points off because they did vanilla and coconut in the beer, and it just wasn't present enough to give it top score, but still well above average, 8 out of 10. That brings the Ecliptic Cosmos to a total score of 86 out of 100. So another really great score. All of these beers, fantastic. There was only a 5-point total spread between them. I could recommend any of these beers to anybody, particularly if you're a big fan of IPAs or if you're just getting into them. This one might be a bit too bold for you. This one might be a bit too bold for you if you're not that into IPAs or just getting into them, starting to train your palate for bitters. But this would be a pretty good one. I would recommend that. I don't think that's overbearing, that it would put you off of IPAs altogether. At any rate, that's today's review. I really enjoyed it. I love IPAs. It's always a blast anytime I get to try a bunch of new ones, and I got 3 here, and they were all great. As always, really appreciate you tuning in. We are growing our channel. If you enjoyed this content, got some value out of it, maybe learned a little something, I would encourage you to please consider liking and subscribing. It does help others find our content, because we're just doing what we're doing to help the craft beer industry and get the word out and help people that are trying to get into craft beer and certainly figure out what to choose. And we just want craft to last as long as it can. This is a movement that I just hope it's not a short-term thing. I would love to see the artistry and the ingenuity continue, and most of them are small business owners, and it's supporting local and national small businesses, and I am a massive supporter of that. So that's my shtick. I appreciate it as always. If you want to keep in the loop for when we drop our videos, you can click the notification bell and it will notify you directly as soon as our videos go live. We are dropping to start here in the opening months of our channel, a couple of videos per week. It will be increasing over time. We are hard at work at coming up with much more content and recording a ton up front so we can get ahead of schedule and not get behind on our releases for you. And until next time, folks, we'll see ya. Keep it beer, keep it craft. Cheers.